Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Goldberg. I'm a director of product marketing at Snowflake, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Welcome to the Snowflake office hours with Frontline Education, which provides K-12 schools with school administration software to proactively manage their human capital, business operations, and special education. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll spend time talking with Scott Fair, Senior Data Engineer with Frontline. Scott has over 25 years as a data engineer and business intelligence architect and engineer. So for those of you new to Snowflake, we're a cloud data platform that can support many workloads, with the main one being used as a data warehouse to power business intelligence tools. Scott can talk to that workload, but much of his content will focus on Snowflake's ability to enable customers to easily share data in their data warehouse with others, excluding partners. So because this is an office hours, the bulk of the content's actually you asking questions to Scott. So as the event proceeds, type all and any questions you have into the Q&A panel on the On24 dashboard. And then at the when Scott's done with his slides, we'll leave time for me to verbally ask all your questions off of Scott. So without further ado, Scott, off to you.
Thank you. Hello. As he said, my name is Scott Fair, and I'm the Senior Data Engineer for Frontline Education. We provide software as a service applications for recruiting, absence, professional growth. And one of the functions that we serve is the Frontline Research and Learning Institute. What we do is leverage the data, the solutions data, and provide that to research institutions like Johns Hopkins, Brown University. Johns Hopkins had reviewed our data and said that it was nationally representative of the U.S. education system. And that means we have lots of data, and we share that in an anonymized fashion with research partners so that they can glean insights from that data. Before Snowflake, and I should preface that by saying that I have been with the company 2.5 years, and we have been using Snowflake for 2.5 years. That was the first task I had coming in, was to figure out how to share data with the research partners. As I said, it's a large nationally representative data set. We have 9,500 organizations and several million users. One of the applications, absence management, will use voice. It calls people and call substitute teachers, and other teachers can call in and report absences. So there's a lot of call data and a lot of tracking data that we had. So in trying to share that data with our research partners, we would have to do the traditional BCP, the files out to CSV. We are a Microsoft shop, so we use SQL Server, and we're not, at that point, we hadn't been in the cloud at all, except for some applications maybe used Azure in some instances, but for the most part, these were physical boxes in our data center. So our pain points were that it took time to get one of the DBAs to extract the data into the CSV files. It had to be scheduled. We had to free up disk space on a drive because these are large files, and they would have to land in full CSV form before we could zip them. Then we had to store those files, compress them, send them up to the FTP site, and then there was always invariably assistance that was required in connecting and setting up application security and setting up user security to go in and get the data. And then once they finally got access to it and downloaded that data, the data files we used were so big that it was hard for the researchers to use. They were running laptops or desktop applications, not huge amounts of RAM. And the users at that point were trying to do a lot of things in using R or Python, and they're just trying to connect with the CSVs, and they're having loads of problems trying to use it. So when I got hired, my boss tasked me, the first thing walking in the door was, let's check out this Snowflake thing and see what that's all about. So after Snowflake, and let me describe the process of getting there. Walking into it fresh, we wanted to put our data into Snowflake, so we created a data sharing database. And it's not data sharing like you may see the data share house. This is just a database that we would create users and create a new schema off the database and create views in the schema that access the tables. And this was good from a security standpoint because you can provide access for a user directly to a schema, provide read only using the view, and they never knew what the base tables looked like. They only had access to their specific view. And the great thing about doing it this way was I could then create a compute resource. Snowflake calls it a warehouse. I could create a warehouse for each specific organization. And when the users would log in, use the warehouse to run their queries, we could segregate and track their usage based on warehouse load. So eventually we automated the process where we would BCP the files into CSVs on a network drive and then use, as I said, we're a Microsoft shop, so we were using SSIS to process folders, compress the files after stripping out any special characters and processing that. Then I had gotten a component pack from ZappySys, I believe it was, and they have tools for connecting to S3 buckets. So we would take the compressed, we gzip the SSIS output CSV files, gzip them, transfer them to the S3 bucket, and then using just a standard ADO.NET connection, connect to Snowflake and issue the copy into commands that would put the data into staging tables and then run SQL statements. And now we use Snowflake stored procedures to pull that data in and update records and put our effective dates on them and things like that. Also, the setup for this was then automated so that when a person would come in and say, this is a new data sharing partner, they would fill in a Excel spreadsheet with their users and their organization, and we can create users, create schemas, create views, warehouses, assign all the permissions, and even output the initial welcome to Frontline Research Institute data sharing email so that people can get in and view the data. Another great aspect of Snowflake is that it uses multi-factor authentication. So we use two-factor authentication. So when you try and access it buzzes you on the phone so they can be sure that you are you and when you're accessing the data. So after Snowflake, we were able to implement sharing of our data to our research partners, and I was able to set up a new partner and onboard them in minutes as opposed to the week that it had taken previously to set them up. So that is my overview, and I am here to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. So just a quick reminder to folks, please submit questions for Scott via the Q&A panel in On24. That's going to be the majority of the content for the rest of the office hours. So go ahead and type them in there. So we've got a couple of starting to come in now, Scott. So the first one is, one is just a real simple one. How many reader accounts do you have?
Reader accounts. We actually didn't use reader accounts. I have just regular accounts that only have access. Right now, I believe we have 50 accounts.
Okay. And then the other one is, I guess for these other accounts, how did you automate the creation of database objects for all these accounts?
That's really interesting. With Snowflake, you can create everything using SnowSQL. So create a database is simply create database and your name, and it will create a database in there. And by knowing the list of tables that we had that I store in a text file, I can just loop through that. And since the syntax for creating all the tables and all the views and everything is the same, then you just plug that in. It was just a loop where I concatenate the string and then issue that command through the ADO.NET connection.
Gotcha. Another question here is and by the way, you don't have to name names here, Scott, you can kind of keep it generic, but what other solutions did you look at when you were evaluating, alongside of Snowflake, when you're making the evaluation? Why did Snowflake come out on top?
Snowflake won the competition over several of the other cloud providers. The pricing model was really important for the Research and Learning Institute. The project was not highly funded, so because it was kind of an adjunct, a value add, we wanted to be really cost effective, and the pricing model where you can spin up a compute resource called a warehouse, and then you run the query, and then if it sits, it turns itself off in down as low as 5 minutes. It's very cost effective as opposed to some of the other services where what you do is you say, I have a warehouse and it takes a while to turn it on and it takes a while to turn it off. This is just on, off, 5 minutes, do your query. And a lot of the queries that we have, I have a load that went 4 hours. I got it down to 30 seconds in Snowflake by turning the nodes on the query up.
Gotcha. Another question came in, Scott. It says, how do you give transparency to your external accounts about how many credits they're using? Do you use resource monitors as guardrails? So I guess just overall managing consumption.
Okay, we do use resource monitors to check. There is limits that you can put using the resource monitors, and it is easy to check history for usage based on account. So I have another process that just queries that. That's another table that you can just query, the usage, warehouse usage view, and you can just run it and put your own, whatever type of monitoring you want to put on there if you really want to.
Gotcha, perfect. And for those new to stuff like resource monitors, I mean, essentially what they are is they're used to help control costs and avoid unexpected credit usage caused by running virtual warehouses with Snowflake. And you can use them to impose limits on the number of credits that are consumed by user-managed virtual warehouses or even virtual warehouses used by cloud services. So that's a nice way to kind of manage costs and usage. Okay, so let's find another one here. Pretty specific here, but it says, did you consider using SnowSQL to transfer the data into Snowflake staging instead of SSIS?
If you mean like using it from like a Python script or something, yeah, I wanted to do that, but there were other members on my team that I was going to have to share this with, and they were only just getting up to speed on Python, and we don't have any. My C# is not really that good, so we weren't going to do something like that. The tool that had been used for other things in our group was SSIS. So my goal is to maybe move some of that work, some of that load out of SSIS, because we're now moving our data warehouse from SQL Server and moving it completely into Snowflake. So there's other processes. We're going to take the SQL Server operations data, and then we're going to process that up. We have some of the pieces in Python that we're doing, but as of right now, it was all just SSIS.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's hear another question came in. I'll let you take a first cut at this one, Scott. It just says, so if data is shared with me, is there a process for me to load the data directly into another warehouse?
If the data is shared with you, if I'm sharing you there, you could create your own tables if you have an account that'll do that. We don't let our users create. The permissions are very granular for what somebody can do when they're inside a database. So I have the solutions data warehouse, and then I create a schema for you to use, and then you have views, and I grant you select permission on those views. Now, if you got into the web IDE and you wanted to say create table as, select from, or create table and put other data in, you have to have permission to create tables in that schema in order to do that. That would be something I could grant somebody if we had a reason to do that. And getting table, from the web interface, there is actually a load data option, and you could actually put your own data from a spreadsheet or something like that, put it in there.
Yep. And just to build on what Scott said, if you are a consumer of data, that someone is sharing data with you, it is a very easy process to then copy it into your own database, your own table. But that's, of course, as Scott mentioned, assuming you have those kind of privileges and functionality in your account. It's just a very simple statement to do that. So that's pretty easy to do. Let's see. Another question came in, and it says, are you running both Microsoft SQL and Snowflake in parallel for a period of time, or did you already sunset the Microsoft SQL app?
We are running them in parallel because we're using the existing SQL Server to validate that everything's working fine in Snowflake. So far, everything has been. So it actually is on our plan for this year to finally move all of the dependencies, point everything to Snowflake, and we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of that SQL Server instance and the box entirely, I believe.
Gotcha. Okay. What came in? It's asking around BI tools. So are you using any dashboarding tools like Tableau?
We actually have Power BI is what we're using. We also have done some we would fill in data into Excel. There's some Excel that way, and we have some web pages that use some of the other JavaScript type libraries.
Okay, so this looks like I think it's a kind of a partial question here. I'll let you kind of fill in the blanks here. It says, how did the migration of procedures from T-SQL to Snowflake? So I guess they're just asking, how did it work, the migration process of moving from T-SQL over to Snowflake?
Snowflake stored procedures are basically JavaScript. So and there's SQL-based stored procedures. It's not exactly one-to-one. It wasn't like migrated over. I had to rewrite things. But once we got the pattern down where you call this, and I use some stage tables to pull things and throw it there as a kind of a scratch pad type thing. And I use transient, like it's like a temp table, but it's called a transient table in Snowflake, and it just runs. They run really well, and we really like them, but it wasn't a real easy process to migrate them over.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay, so a question came in. I think I can, probably answer this one. It just says, can I share additional data I added with my colleagues?
Oh, absolutely.
And the answer is yeah. It's very easy. So
it's as easy as if you have you can do a grant select on all tables in a schema, and it's just there because we are running on AWS, so we do use the S3. But when we dump it and put it into Snowflake, it's real easy to grant access to anything that's there.
Yep. Yeah. So and to build on that, if it's someone internal, you can just give them access to. You can sort of add them as a user and give them a role within your own account, and that's kind of a no-brainer. If they're external or even a colleague who you don't want to have full, direct access to your account, you can use the data sharing that Scott's been talking about. Either you share it with someone who has a full Snowflake account, or you give them a very bare bones reader account, and they can access the data. So there's a couple of different ways to share data with others. Okay, so in terms of scalability, do you have any metrics, Scott, on Snowflake scale versus the other solutions you evaluated? I think it was X faster or anything like that. Question came in.
Oh, and we didn't evaluate the other solutions really hardcore. Basically, we just said basic. If something takes X long and it takes over here, and we said X times whatever the rate was, it would take this long. So a lot of it was other administration and some ease of use type concerns. But then when we really got into Snowflake and we did our proof of concept with Snowflake, when we said, okay, this is how much faster it would be to run this process. The table that I built, the one history table, took 4 hours on SQL Server, and I got it to 30 seconds on Snowflake. Right now we have our absence and our professional growth builds. Those two on our SQL Server box would take 8 hours, both of them running all day. And what we can do now is they're both done within a 2-hour time period. And that's not running. We even run using 2 nodes on that rather than, you can turn it all the way up to 256. But we only need 2 and it gets it done. There's one point where I turn it up to 8 just to get it done faster. So that was the balance point between speed and price.
Gotcha. Okay, so another very specific question here, Scott, but are you running Snowflake on AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform?
We are on AWS.
AWS, okay. Is there any reason, someone's kind of asking this, is there any reason specific you picked Snowflake on AWS? Any kind of like additional functionality that you would get through the AWS platform?
We had already been using it for some other projects. AWS had some fans in the organization, and there were some of the leadership who were not fans of some of the other services. So they said, we're not going to do it on the other thing. And when we started, I don't think Snowflake was available on the other platforms yet. So it was the first one, and we really wanted to get in and start using it.
Gotcha. Perfect. And again, for those new to Snowflake, just to be clear, we have essentially one product that we offer, one UI, but under the covers, it's your option, but you can have it run on either Google Cloud Platform, AWS, or Azure. A question came up saying, well, can you run Snowflake on-premise? And the answer is no, we're fully cloud. And another question was asking about private clouds, and the answer is no, we work in the public cloud. As a service, you access this via a URL. So that's kind of the 101. Another question came in about replication, and Snowflake does support replication, where you can take all the contents in a database and replicate them to another Snowflake account. And it could be cross-cloud, so you could, let's say, even replicate from AWS East, let's say Google Central. So we're very much multi-cloud, cross-cloud, and future-proof in that regard. Okay. So question came in, Scott. How do you manage things such as views? Do you do that via the UI or via code or SnowSQL?
If there's something I need to create for somebody pretty quick, I can get in and do it in the UI. You can click a button to create a view. If you've done it often enough, you can create a view in the there's a worksheet. When you go in the website, there's a worksheet and you say create view as select and do it that way. The syntax there is pretty similar. I have not used like the SnowSQL to run it from a script, although that's not true. In SSIS, I am creating, when we automate the data sharing, to create the research partners their own view and their own views off of the tables. Now, the reason why we were creating that is because with research partners, it was very important for them to have a static copy of the database. So at that point, I just clone the data over so that they have their own copy of it. And it doesn't take a lot because it's really pointers for metadata, the way Snowflake works with the micropartitions. So I can say clone the database. The entire database clones in, a matter of seconds, and then they have their own copy, but I haven't given them select permissions on the tables. They get the views so that they can't see what the actual underlying architecture is.
Gotcha, great. By the way, I'll hand out two questions really quickly here. One is just about how to become an authorized solution partner with Snowflake. And for that, I would direct you to our website, just snowflake.com. At the top, there's a partners link, and you can apply to join our partner program, both as a tech partner or in this case, as a delivery partner. So I would refer you to go there. Another question came in around developer instances and developer assistance. For that, I would point you to our relatively new snowflake.com/developers website. So if you go to that website, you'll learn a lot about how we support and enable developers and things we do for them to help support building apps on top of Snowflake. Okay, so yeah, all right. Question came in, and Squat says, quote, "You mentioned about performance optimization to 30 seconds. What did you change? Was it SQL optimization or something with leveraging architecture for parallel processes?" End quote.
What I changed in that was the original developer had used some loops that I took out. What I had done was, where there was a function, I turned that into its own view, which because everything it's a columnar kind of storage, so it was really fast. And then I also turned it from one node up to about 1, 2, 4, 8 to get it to process like that. So there was a different way of handling the task that we wanted to do. So it wasn't just come over and do it. I basically rewrote it, but I took out some of the things. There are functions that you can use, and we did have a function in there. We replicated that, and that still performed pretty well. Some of the other scratchpad type things, we just threw in a transient table, and I believe that was all we needed to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question came in about any news on the deployment of the Numeracy UI with Snowflake. And for those of you kind of new to Snowflake, we did buy a kind of a smaller startup last year called Numeracy, which has an amazing sort of query UI. And we've been a bit quiet on it. And all I will say is we haven't forgotten about it. Stay tuned. We got some news coming out over the next couple of months about our enhanced UI. So stay tuned for that. Okay, another question came in around. So this is interesting, Scott. Just it asks, what kind of new initiatives are you pushing forward this year, and how have they maybe changed after you brought in Snowflake?
That's a very good question. Because we used Snowflake data sharing, and it is very cost effective, we're now talking about moving all of our reporting into a central solution that reports off the data warehouse. So we're talking with our product management people right now about moving all of the sources. Some of the sources for the smaller applications, they were actually doing it out of the OLTP databases, which nobody really wants to do. So they were asking if we could use Snowflake to source our KPIs for the web applications, and that is what we're working on right now. I just had a meeting yesterday and talking to people about doing that. So they want to source our KPIs for the web applications from Snowflake, and everybody's really excited about doing that. Two products are really jumping on it.
Gotcha. Okay. And just for those on the call, I know this office hours run till 30 after. We're going to probably go about 5 minutes after, just 'cause we've got a couple of really good questions in the mix, so we'll keep going a little bit. Question came in, I'll handle this one, Scott. It just says, do you have a best practices document around migrating a data warehouse to Snowflake? And the answer is yes, we do. If you just literally Google Snowflake migration guides, the top link comes up, and it'll point you to a couple of migration guides that we have for a couple of the legacy data warehouses and how to go from them to Snowflake. Of course, you can also go from another first-gen cloud data warehouse to Snowflake, but these are more from on-premise to Snowflake. They're a good read. I'll just be upfront. They're relatively high level, and that's just because every migration is obviously going to be very unique in terms of cost and complexity and duration. So we recommend you engage with Snowflake to kind of scope out your migration, because it really depends not just on how much data you have, but how much maybe stored procedures and code you have, the BI tools you're using, your ETL processes. So it's no one guide can kind of give you that detailed answer on how exactly to do a migration. But again, Google search, you'll get some good high-level migration guides. Okay, so the question here, Scott, just says, do you have an automated capability to sync Snow code with GitHub, SNO code?
No, I don't. I was working on that. What I want to do is you can actually pull the SQL for any object that you create, stored procedures, anything like that, because you have describe table, describe database, describe, and that outputs it into a text file. So I've been working on a way to pull that out, dump it into files, and then just save it into my GitHub folder structure. But I didn't see a tool that does that for you. I was trying to write one. Maybe Gotcha. I'll do a startup and I'll sell it to you guys.
There you go. There you go. Like the enthusiasm. So, okay. So another one came in here. How do you manage migration of objects from a low environment to production? So I'm guessing that maybe is like from test dev to production? Or is that even a concern for you?
Yeah, we have dev instances. I have dev databases, and what I do is I just point the create object code and then point it to the new. Because what you can do is, if I have something in like RH, recruit and hire, you do RH _dev, and I'm working in there and everything's ready to go. I type in the window, I'll type use RH. And after it's been tested and approved and everything, I can go in and go use RH. And now it's pointing to my production database or my production schema or whatever it is. You can use database, use schema name, and then do the create statement, create or replace statement, and it'll go in there and create it. So it's manual, but it's real easy.
Excellent, excellent. And then I'll just touch on one last question here that came in. It's basically asking, to paraphrase, it's asking, can Snowflake work with ETL vendors, as an enterprise data warehouse for reporting needs? And the short answer on that is absolutely yes. That's our core workload is being used as an enterprise data warehouse. So we'll take in any structured or semi-structured data that you have in the organization. And semi-structured could be JSON, Avro, Parquet, CSVs, XML, etc. How you get the data into Snowflake really varies. You can use third-party ETL tools like Matillion or Informatica, etc. We have connectors for Kafka and Spark, so you can stream data into Snowflake. So you have options there as well. And then once the data is inside of Snowflake, you just put it into databases and tables, and then you can query it with any BI tool as you see fit. So Tableau, Looker, Informatica, Power BI, you name it, we'll work with any BI tool. And we have a JDBC, ODBC driver as well, so we can work with any tool that leverages those protocols. So yeah, we're your classic enterprise data warehouse, plus more. So with that, let me just take a look at the questions real quick. Yeah, it looks like we've hit all the main questions here. So with that, We're out of time, so I'm going to wrap up the office hours. I want to give a big thanks to Scott at Frontline Education for all the great content, and of course, all of you in the audience for the great questions that you posed to Scott. So this will be recorded and sent to you via email, and hopefully we'll see you at the next office hours in 2 weeks from now. In the interim, I'd encourage all of you to visit snowflake.com to learn more about us and to see our case studies and videos. And also on the homepage, you can easily sign up for a 30-day free trial of Snowflake, where you get $400 worth of free credits, and you also get access to a self-service tutorial that that gives you some demo data. I'm going to walk you through how to load that demo data into Snowflake, join it, run some queries on it, and you'll have that aha moment with Snowflake within literally 15, 30 minutes. So with that, thanks for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.